Good morning. Good morning. Let me try that one more time. Good morning. Okay, I know some of you that are sitting way back in the back of the back. I don't blame you, because I remember when I had a speaker here, maybe a year or so ago. You were trying to get in the back today so that if it was a 3-hour-long speaker, you could ease out and nobody would know. But I am going to tell you that you really do need to be able to see the slides, so just please sit or feel free to move where you can see the slides, because today, I promise you, you are going to want to see the slides. You are in for a great treat. Today, come on in, have a seat toward the front, feel free. I am going to kind of push this forward. Normally, I like to start about 5 or 10 minutes late. That's the way I operate. But I know Mr. McNulty has to leave in an hour and 50, or has to leave by 9:15. So I want him to have as much time as possible to talk to you today. Yesterday, he was here with us, and actually, I got to hear him 3 different times yesterday, and I got something new out of every time. And I didn't get bored a single time, if that tells you anything, and you know me. So he spoke to our parents yesterday at a lunch meeting, and I think that went over very well. There were a good number of parents there. And then he spoke with, during dinner last night, he spoke with our administrators, central office staff, and then again last night he talked with another set of parents. But it was a great day of learning, and I am so excited about what he has to say to you today. I think it's going to resonate with you. I'll have to say that up front that he will be leaving at 9:15, so please give him your full attention today, because we want him to move as fast as possible and get as much out there. After listening to yesterday, it made me really proud of the things that you're doing in your classroom. It kind of validated to me that the way you're moving in your classroom and the hard work that you're doing really is in the right direction to make our children career ready. And so it's very validating and very exciting to hear that. I know how hard you've all been working to make those changes in your classroom, and I think you're going to see many things that he's going to say are next practices that we're already implementing and that you've been working very hard on. He's also going to show you some things that we need to continue to do. And so at this time, let me introduce Mr. Ray McNulty. Mr. McNulty has worked with the Gates Foundation. He has, and he'll tell you more about his background, but he's worked with the Gates Foundation, and he also has worked with the International Center for Leadership and Education. And if any of you know Bill Daggett, I know he's been to Alabama a number of times. He works closely with him. In fact, they talk weekly. Ken Robinson, that we saw the video on, the English guy that's so funny that now lives here, and I guess in California, he embraces those same ideas. So this is not something different. This is absolutely more the same to validate the direction we're going in. So today, if you will, help me welcome Mr. Ray McNulty.
Thank you. Thanks. So how is everyone this morning? Good? All right. Let me get my things there. Coffee. Need coffee. So it's, it's exciting for me, at least. I've been on the road. I started last week in Puerto Vallarta. Do you know what was on last week, Friday? Puerto Vallarta. I was on vacation. Major hurricane came through, and I left there to go to a speech in Houston where the hurricane was sitting over Houston. And then I went to Austin, and it was raining crazily in Austin for a speech. And then I was supposed to fly back to Boston, and through Minneapolis. They couldn't. They flew me into Atlanta where the hurricane was sitting. And then yesterday morning, as I got up early in the morning, 3:30 a.m. to drive to get a flight to come here, the hurricane was sitting over Boston. So I've been hanging out with Patricia for like 5 straight days. And it was so wonderful to get up this morning and go outside, and it was just really beautiful. A little bit about me before I get started. I'm a teacher by trade. I'm a trained educator. I'm not smarter than anybody in this room. I just have had different jobs. And when you have different jobs, you see things a little differently. So I was a teacher, a principal, assistant superintendent for 20 years in Vermont, became commissioner of education there, left there to work with Bill and Melinda Gates when they started their foundation. I did 2.5 years with them, reinventing high schools and traveling the world. Left there to work with a guy by the name of Bill Daggett, who's a futurist, and actually spent 15 years with Bill, and I still work for the center, but I decided a year and a half ago that I should give higher ed a try. So I became the dean at Southern New Hampshire University. Do any of you know Southern New Hampshire University? You ever see our ads and the bus, the big bus? Southern New Hampshire University is an interesting place. It was named, it's a nonprofit university. We have a campus. We have 4,000 students on campus, 80,000 students online, and another 10,000 students in a competency-based education program where there are no classes. That's called College for America. And we were named the 12th most innovative company in the world in 2012. And it's an interesting place to work at. It's not the traditional university. It's been honored many times for being a little bit forward-thinking. And I've been there trying to rethink teacher education. How do we create teachers for the future? So I'm going to talk not about that today. I want to talk about education today. And I want to talk with you this morning. I actually had 2 titles for this talk, so I put them both up. My first title I had was Educators Have the Power, Let's Use It. How come I gravitated to that title? Because here's a fact. At the International Center every year, we identify 20 of the nation's highest performing elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And when I go to those schools and I look at what they're doing, those schools have not been changed by the governor, the legislature, the Department of Education, by the president of this country. When we find great schools, it's the people in the school that have caused the school to become great. It's nobody from the outside. That's why I really believe educators have the power. But the second title I gravitated to this morning was this one, The Next Chapter for Education. Because let's face it, I was trained to be a teacher, and I think many of you were, during the age where we use a lot of textbooks. We use the Encyclopedia Britannica. We have a system that goes from kindergarten to first grade to second grade to third grade, and we have one teacher and 25 or so kids, and that's been our motto. That's been how we've thought about education. But the fact of the matter is, I learned more after I left school than when I was in school, and I think everybody in this room has learned more since they left school. And the question is, if you learn outside of school, shouldn't it be of any value? Shouldn't somebody value that? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But the fact is, there's more ways to learn today than ever before. And we have to start to embrace some of those changes. So I'm going to get started on my talk, and I apologize in advance for kind of like leaving, but that's always a good thing too, because I'm going to say some things that you're not going to be happy about. And I'll be like halfway to the Dothan Airport by the time you go, I'm going to get, no. But I do it for a particular reason. And I think you do this with your students sometimes too. I do it to provoke some thought about the work we do. Here's the simple fact. When change outside of a business is moving quicker than change inside the business, if change on the outside is moving faster than change on the inside, the end is near. And quite frankly, I grew up in inner city Boston. My mom graduated from 6th grade, my dad high school. No one went to college. I am a strong believer in public education. I'm a strong believer that public education is what makes this country what it is. And we could potentially lose public education if we really don't embrace some of what's out there. And one of the other messages I'm going to share with you this morning is this one. We, the educators, need to be the agents of change. We all take on this idea of being victims, like they're doing this to us, they're doing this to us. And what I want you to understand this morning is that you have the ability to make the change. I can tell you, I can promise you that you do, because I see it. I see it all across the country when schools inside believe that they have the ability to make the change. So I'm a strong believer in educators. I don't think anybody else should be monkeying with our schools. I think it should be educators. But I also understand that educators need to also realize that this is a very different world today. So I have a couple of key messages, and once I get, this is kind of like my setting the stage as a teacher. I'm just kind of setting the stage. I'll give you my lesson plan in a minute. But I have a couple of key messages this morning. One of them is that there's a lot of things in our schools that would have been nice to have a while ago, but now they're really important to have. So it's kind of like, in my mind, I remember when cell phones first came out, it would be nice to have a cell phone, but it wasn't necessary, but now it's necessary. And the same thing in education. There were things going on that would be nice to have. So one of them is innovation. We should have an environment in our schools very similar to the environment in any big company, because you're the second largest employer in this area. The culture inside this institution should be about how can we improve it? Where can we go next? What can we do? Kind of the same culture that places like Google, places like Amazon, places like Apple, places like Microsoft, those are the culture in there is, what do we do next? Not how do we take the past and perfect it? No. It's like, where do we need to take this thing? Second is that digital learning, particularly game-based, adaptive engines, the ability to monitor student skills. We should be using technology to manage all of those basic skills and to teach it. I'm going to talk a little bit, just very briefly, about that this morning. I actually cut some of that out because I wanted to get a few other things in. But the other key message this morning is this, and then I am going to talk a little bit about this morning. It's this. How many of you out there, I can't see everybody because of the lights, but how many people have read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset? Anybody? If you haven't, it's a great read. Mindset, she writes about something very, very important to us as educators. She said we either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And a fixed mindset, a lot of times we see kids, I have 9 grandkids, so I've been working on them on getting a growth mindset. So here's what I mean by that. They'll come home from school and they'll have a paper and they'll have 100 in their math test. And their mother will say to them, "Oh, you must be really good at math." And I immediately say to her, "No, don't say that." And they look at me, my daughter-in-laws look at me like, "What do you mean don't say it? He's good at math." No, you don't want to say he's good at math. He's going to have a mindset that math is what he's good at, and maybe English he's not good at, or reading he's not good at. So you want them to have, instead of saying you're really good at something, you should say, you must work really hard to achieve those skills. That's pushing that it's not a fixed, you don't have a math gene and a science gene and some other gene in your body. It's about hard work pays off. You can improve yourself. And the point I want to make is that in education, we do this with kids a lot. We basically tell them, come on, work harder, you'll get it. Coaches say that. Music teachers say work hard. But it's not always, a lot of times we say to them, oh, you're really good at this. And they get this mindset that it's fixed. Like you either have a math gene or you don't. There's a lot of kids that will go around going, I'm not good at math. We have a lot of educators that will say, no, I'm not good at technology. I don't do technology. That's for the tech people. I don't do technology. Look, it's not about doing it and you don't have a technology gene. It's about mindset. It's about if you put effort into it, you can change the world. And that's what this morning is about. It's about encouraging this idea of a growth mindset. Last but not least, don't tell me there's something that educators can't do. I mean, I work with a high school in Brockton, Massachusetts. 80% reported poverty. It's a high school of 4,300 students. 80% poverty, 60% English language learners. Highest performing urban high school in the state of Massachusetts. They got the Bloods, the Crips in their school, there's drugs all around there, and this school operates at the highest level in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has the highest standards in the country, and this school blows people away. 4,300 kids, and everyone looks at them like, what did they do? Guess what? It was the educators inside the building. They were on the front page of the Boston Globe in 1999. They were called a cesspool. How'd you like you work at a school that is on the front page of a major national paper and says, this place is a cesspool? Then the teacher said, we're better than this. And they have taken this school to a flagship school. If you Google Brockton High School, you'll find PBS, CBS, they've done series on them. Who did it? It's the teachers that did it. It wasn't the governor. It wasn't the Department of Education. They got together and they put their minds to it, and they actually turned the school around. So this is really a key for me. I'm not here to tell educators, the world is different and we're all going down. It's not. It's all up to us. We can let it go. So here's what I'm going to do this morning. I'm going to, as my lesson plan, I'm an educator like you all. So I want to talk about the landscape. I want to talk about the challenge. And I'll tell you when I change. I want to talk about teacher agency, this whole idea of a growth mindset. Then a few closing pieces of advice and exit stage right and before the traffic gets bad. And I apologize in advance, but I hope to come back someday. So let me talk about this education landscape for a minute. Here's what I know. Almost everyone wants schools to be better. I've not found a person that doesn't. But this is also what I know. Almost no one wants them to be different. And the fact is they're going to need to be different before they get better. Now, when I show this slide to educators, here's the deal. Anybody here from Kilgore, Texas? Just checking before I tell this story. If you are, don't say it to me. About 4 years ago, I think it's exactly 4 years ago, this is an absolute true story. 4 years ago, with the International Center, I was the president then, and we were asked to go out and work. Texas has these big Texas education agencies, and there was a bunch of failing elementary, middle, and high schools in the Kilgore area. So they had this whole team go out to spend 2 days in a training of what we're finding works in high-performing schools. So I'm one of those people that I got to get to the place I'm going to early. So I got to this big building in Kilgore, Texas, and had my coffee and my bag. And I went up to get into this building, and I pulled in, and there's no other car there yet. I'm an hour ahead of schedule. And I tried to get in. No one was there. So I put my coat in my car and my bag, and I took my coffee in USA Today, and there was a bench. And I sat at the bench reading the USA Today and drinking my coffee. And a car came in. And by the way, all the people that were coming to this event they had to have a principal, an assistant principal, and a team of teachers from these failing schools. They were required to be there. Texas demanded they be there. Not me, Texas did. So I'm sitting at this bench and reading the paper, and this woman pulls up, and she walks to the door, and I thought she was opening the door, but she didn't. She kind of tried to get in, and then she saw me sitting down. And this is exactly what happened. I share this with you as something in our profession that happens, but she saw me sitting, and she came over, and she sat down next to me, and the conversation went just like this. Do you have to be here too today? I said, yep. And I'm reading the paper, and she said, you know what? I am sick and tired as an educator of people like the Department of Ed and others and the superintendent telling us we got to go someplace, and I'm not making this up. We got to go someplace to listen to somebody go yank, yank, yank all day long. This is the truth. And then it was like, I'm sitting there going like, oh God. And she said, she said to me, she said, yak, yak, yak. She said, all they need to do is give us the time we were going to have here back in our classroom without the kids. We can get caught up on our work, and that's the way we can get this school improved. And I said, yep. And I'm sitting reading the paper. While this is going on, people show up, the building opens up, and she gets up, she says, you coming inside? I said, not yet. I did, I said, I'm reading an article, when I'm done, I'll come in. Okay, see you inside, see you inside. And so she went in, and literally like 2 minutes, I couldn't wait. So I went out, got my bag out of the car, got my jacket, and I walked in, and as I walked in, she was registering at the desk, and she was humped over signing in. And I walked in, and the person that was supposed to meet me was behind the table. And she said, oh, Dr. McNulty, it's so great to have you and your team here today, and all this. And this lady turned and looked up at me, and I looked at her, and I went, blah, 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 blah. And it was funny, because she was like trying to, like, well, I really didn't mean kind of so, no, I got it, I know what you mean. But the fact of the matter is that, look we're in the learning profession. We are in the learning profession. And we should be the most thoughtful about learning. Things have changed. I mean, you see this slide? This is what happens in 60 seconds on the internet. Every 60 seconds. You can't read it from where you are. I'm closer than you are, but like 700,000 Google searches, 700,000 every 60 seconds. 25 hours of videos uploaded, 25 hours uploaded every 60 seconds, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable what's going on in the world. And we want to sit in our classroom and correct papers so that we can be ready. It's like, ready for what? I mean, it's going at lightning speed outside, and I was trained with the Encyclopedia Britannica. I mean, it was in my room. It never moved. It was 26, 28 volumes. It was right there. All right? This is like moving at lightning speed. We're learning more stuff at any moment. I mean, you could be sitting there right now, and it doesn't bother me if you are, either buying something on Amazon, doing your banking, putting stuff on Facebook. It's what happens. People used to knit. They don't knit anymore. I mean, this is the world. And we want to sit around and figure out, like, if they just give me a little more time, I'll catch up. It's not happening. It's not happening. Our biggest challenge is this, the status quo. We're spending so much time trying to perfect the past. Yeah, it'll be really great, because we got to stop school in the summer so the kids can, work on farms and do all that good stuff. That's not happening either. They could be spending their whole summer doing things and learning, and then we don't even value it. We got to figure out how to make this system work. See, in order for our schools to get better, they're going to have to be different first. It's about first different, then better. That's how transformation occurs. It's not better. You don't get better right away. Matter of fact, one of my favorite examples is golfing. I'm not a great golfer, but every time someone gives me a tip, my game goes to hell. All right? But they say, you got to keep doing it, got to keep doing it, and eventually it gets worse, then it gets better. Not always, particularly with golf. But anyway, the theory is, you have an implementation dip, and then things get better. So my point is, you can't build the future by perfecting the past, and that's best shown to you by one of my favorite cartoons. I mean, we'll wake up someday, and I mean, it will have been gone. It's just gone. We'll be the only people left in a school, and people will be saying, like, well, where are the kids? They're all online. It's a different world. And I'm not by the way, let me make one point real clear. We will always have teachers, and I'll show you why as I progress in my talk. We will always have teachers. Our roles will change a little bit for some kids, and for other kids it won't change. There'll be kids that will need us to be there to teach them everything. There will be other kids that will be there, that will be learning on their own, and we'll be their coach. But it's going to be very different, and we need to start to embrace that. So I was the chair of the National Dropout Prevention Board up to 2 weeks ago. I'm now the past chair. And I built this slide to show the problem that is the problem we have that's built into our, this is not your problem. This problem we all have, because we have a system design problem. So let me share this design problem with you. The vertical line here is all the knowledge and skills you need in 1 year. So if you stacked up all the content for first grade or ninth grade or whatever, 1 year, the bottom line is number of days, 180 generally around the United States. So here's my point. We give every kid that comes to this school 180 days of ninth grade, 180 days of kindergarten, 180 days of math, 180 days of social studies. I refer to these kids as the on-pace students. They need exactly 180 days. There might be 5 of them in all of the school. There are a lot of kids that don't need as many days as we give them. There are some that need more days in English than they do in math, but if we actually gave them the content, some of them could blow through it pretty quickly. But we don't let them. And then there are others that need a heck of a lot more time, and we don't give it to them. We stop them at 180. Now just think about that. That's our system. That's how it was designed. It was designed during a period where we had a big middle. We had a lot of people in the middle. The world today is incredibly diverse. There is no middle. What's the average American? Nobody knows. Actually, there is no average American anymore. They figured that out. There's a big hole right in the middle. And anything that goes in there, the air goes out and the bump goes right down flat. And it's like we have incredible diversity. The system, when it was designed for teaching to the middle. Just think about this. Think about this. My wife's a jogger. She runs. I don't. You can tell. I don't run. But she likes to run half marathons and, 13.1 miles. She always says, "You want to do it?" No. But I know I could do 13.1 miles, but I would stop at Starbucks and, I'd have lunch. And I can get there. I know I can get there, right? But it's about time. So if you think about, if we let education, this design, run a race, here's what the race would look like. We're going to give you have to go 13.1 miles, and we're going to give you all 2 hours and 30 minutes to do it. So we're going to have a bunch of people that are going to get to the finish line in a little over an hour, and they're going to say, "Oh, you can't cross the finish line. Stay right there." Right? Then we're going to have others, and nobody's going to get there right at that moment. And then there's going to be a bunch of us back here, and at 2 hours and 30 minutes, we're going to say, "Stop." And they're going to say, "We didn't do it." And then everybody cross. And the problem with that is it's the same problem we have in our schools. We have a lot of students that, quite frankly, that drop out right there because we make them wait, and they get incredibly bored. They act out, and that's a problem. We operate on a time-based system. And I like to think of it this way. If you're focused on, seat time, that's the wrong end. Our job is about teaching and learning. It's not about time. I mean, if you have an infant, do they all walk at the same point? No. You're supposed to walk at, 10 months? I don't know what it is. But if you don't do it, I guess you'll never walk. And if you walk early, say, "Sit down. It's not 10 months yet." You don't move. No, it's not the way it works. And education has, it worked okay for a long time, but it works less now because learning is everywhere. See, learning's expanded at a rate that's far outpaced our conceptions of teaching. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, you could be sitting at home taking all kinds of courses. You could be doing anything. And so really the point is that teaching is really only one way to achieve learning. There's a lot of other ways. A lot of things happen. I love this quote that comes out of a book called The Great Shift. She says this. She says, "Knowing with certainty that someone has mastered a discipline means it shouldn't matter how the person got there or what school they attended. At that point, traditional education's monopoly on delivery would end, and America would see a myriad of new models and providers. I don't want that to happen. I want public education to be the provider. But the fact of the matter is, what if a student over the summer takes Algebra 1 online and comes to school? What happens? They come to you and say, I can do it. I did it all summer. No, but you didn't spend 180 days in Mr. McNulty's class. And that's part of the requirement. You got to not just learn, but you got to sit here for 180 days. So if you can sit there for 180 days, then we'll give you your diploma. You know, that's just not practical anymore. Matter of fact, a lot of states have changed that, and I'll show you what that looks like. So that's the landscape. The landscape is that there's a lot going on out there. So what's the challenge like? So the challenge is, okay, McNulty, if that's what's going on, what kind of education is needed at this moment in history? And all of us in education, we like an answer. We like one answer. Well, what do we need? Tell me and I'll go do it. Well, here's the fact. There's a lot of things we should be doing. There's not one thing. Like that black piece there, that's not the answer. If you didn't do all of this, that's not the answer. That might be the last thing you thought of, but you got to be doing a lot of things. And what are those things? So here's what the research is telling us right now. What do the schools need to begin to think about and look like, and how should they be designed? Well, they should be designed around really 4 basic principles. And the first is this. Look, traditional learning works. Don't throw it out. Don't replace it with something else. What you should be doing is adding dimensions to the model. It should be hybrid. It should be blended. It should be online, and it should be traditional. There are students that would do much better. If they're really good at language arts, they might love being with a teacher because they want to have that conversation. There are other kids that are really good at English, and they don't want to be in a conversation. They want to work on their own. They might be better online. Then there'll be a bunch of students that might like a hybrid model. But the fact of the matter is, we know one model doesn't work for an incredibly diverse population. So we should provide several different models for these kids. Second is learning needs to be personalized. The other word that's being used right now is individualized, but personalized seems to be the word that's moving more quickly in the research. What do I mean by personalized? What we mean by personalized is this. It means learning that takes place anytime, any place, any pace. Well, I have my class on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9. That's the only time we can learn. No, it's not. We have to have models that provide more diversity and more opportunity than that for our kids. So right about now you're saying, well, this guy's probably smoking dope because we can't possibly do this, so hold on for a moment. I'll get there. The other thing is that the learning needs to be engaging. Now here's the fact. Most of us will say, my teaching is engaging. Well, here's what we know. All right, when I was at the Gates Foundation, we did a study. We asked over 650,000 students to give us one word to describe school. What do you think they said? You got it. Cost me $1.2 million to do that study. But we have the facts, all right? It's just not an opinion anymore. Here's the saddest thing. We know it. That's the saddest thing. If I'm boring you, you'll fall asleep, and some of you already have, but that's okay, because there's not a test. But the fact of the matter is, I really feel that when we know they're bored and we know that engagement is critical in learning, we should be saying, what am I going to do about that? By the way, this study that we did, my partner Bill Daggett found another study that was done at the University of Washington that proved it from the medical perspective. So this was a study that was done at the University of Washington, and they put devices to measure brain waves of students during, these were 8th grade students, by the way, so 8th graders do have brain waves, and they proved that, okay? But then they looked at the brain waves, and this is, well, when they sat in class, okay? That's the yellow. This kid didn't go to class. But look at how flat their brain lines are. It matches TV. So my advice to you is, if a kid's sleeping in your class, don't wake him up, because his brain is actually moving much faster, and it could be okay. But what the study proved was that when they're in a passive mode, like being, and this is something, I'm not good at this yet. I'm trying to figure out, because I keep catching myself. We refer to all of our kids as students. And I think students is a very passive word. It means you sit and you're a student. I think we should start calling them learners, because learners is more active. Because what we learned in this study is when they're busy, like when they're doing homework and labs and things like that, there's activity. That's what we want. We want activity. By the way, you should see what these things look like when they're playing a video game. I mean, their brains are firing on all cylinders. So, hybrid, blended, traditional, online, personalized, engaging, and the last point about schools of the future is they need to be competency-based. So what the hell does that mean, right? Well, what's a B mean? What's a B say? You get a B in English or a B in math in 3rd grade. Well, it means you're a B. What does it mean you can do? Well, it doesn't really mean anything. It means we did work and you did good. But really, competency-based is more about identifying exactly what somebody can do. You can either do it or you're in the process of learning it. And the competency-based movement is exploding in this country. Just take a look at this map. So all of you I know have had geography, and you know where Alabama is. It's right here. And it's colored green on this map. All the states that are in red or green are states that have something going on. If it's a red state, they actually have rules and regulations. Like the state of New Hampshire, where I work now, is all red. They abolished the Carnegie Unit. They abolished the Carnegie Unit, and they basically said this: if a student arrives at your school and they can pass the required tests, you must give them credit for the course. So schools are in the process of trying to figure out, how the hell do we manage that? But the fact is, it's about if they can learn it somewhere, we should be able to justify that learning, validate that learning, and give them credit for it. This movement is getting pretty expansive in the United States. You see several states in red. They'll start, once either California or Florida, I don't know about Texas, it's emerging, but you get one of those big states to change, a lot of things will happen in this country with respect to competency. So I want to play a quick video for you. I'm not going to explain why I'm showing it to you until after I show it to you, but just pay somewhat close attention. Wake the person up next to you if you can. They'll get a kick out of it because it's close to Halloween.
This is the hollow head. Actually, at the moment, it's a perfectly normal head of Charlie Chaplin, but wait, as it comes round, you'll see, or will you, that it's hollow. The back of it, coming round now, is actually a hollow mask. It appears to rotate in the opposite direction, and amazingly, the nose sticks out, although it's actually sticking in. Coming round now is the normal, correct, as it were, face. And wait again as it comes round. And you'll see this extraordinary thing like Jekyll and Hyde. Both the noses stick out because it's so unlikely that a nose sticks in that a face is hollow. So you see it as convex, although it's in fact concave, as now.
Kind of cool, huh? Whew. So why did I show you that? Actually, I showed it to you for a couple of reasons. The first is that it's really cool. And it's one of those things that like say, oh, I want to do that. So you can find it on YouTube. It's very simple, Charlie Chaplin's mask. The second reason is that I wanted to explain what happened in that, because there's no trick. As a human being, we look at people's faces all day long. and our eyesight and our brain talk to each other. And the brain is the one that is like the command ship, right? And so the eyes are seeing this face, and then they see this face turn around, and immediately the eyes are saying, this looks different. And the brain says, I'll fix it. And what happened is your brain instantaneously, in a nanosecond, basically made your eyes see what you saw. Because that is a hollow mask. But it made it that way because that's how it's supposed to be. All right? Now, the reason I showed it to you is because I'm standing up here talking about school. You're an expert on school. And you see schools all the time. Schools look a certain way. And when you get somebody up front saying, well, we need to do different things, your brain is saying to you, this guy has no idea. Your brain is saying, you can't do that in a school. You can't let a kid move at their own pace. You can't possibly move to a competency-based system. You can't do these things. And so in your brain and your inside is having this argument like, that's crazy. You can't do it. We're experts on schools. We know what schools look like. Schools start at kindergarten, and you give them 180 days, and you give them 180 days of every grade, and then all the kids that do really well at school become valedictorians, and all the others don't become anything, and that's how it goes. But it's, the point is that innovation, it's very hard for innovation to come out of a field where the experts sit, because experts have very different opinions. They're very focused. And that's why I showed it to you. Because the fact of the matter is that we need to have a culture of innovation. We need to have a culture of innovation, but it's very easy for us to say, that can't work. I know, because I'm an expert. And that's the problem that we have in education. Actually, it's the problem that they have in every industry. It's really hard to innovate in your own industry. And one of the things is that a lot of people will say, it sounds good, but we can't do it because policy won't let us do it. And here's the facts about policy. Policy is the last thing to change. You can't change policy unless you have a practice that shows results, informs policy to change. So at this point in time, I can just say this to you. If you believe that policy has to change first, we might as well board the building up. Because that's what happens to businesses that believe that policy has to change first. We have to create, we have to innovate, we have to have little innovation zones. We have to try things and monitor them to get that if they get results, that's what improves us. I'm going to show you what that looks like, and I'm going to talk a little more about this. But the theory that I'm going to talk about is called disruptive innovation. And there's lots of disruptive innovation. I want to talk about disruptive innovation that pushes us in what I call, it creates positive turbulence. It's pushing us in the right direction, not the wrong direction. Because you can have disruption that can push you in the wrong direction. I want to push you in the right direction, push you toward those 4 kind of design principles I was talking about. So here's my, my simulation of innovation. And so this is, we'll call it, we're here at the high school. So this is Enterprise High School. You're all faculty. I just made all of you faculty, and I'm the principal. I get to make myself the principal. It's kind of what goes on. So this is a big faculty meeting. And so we're sitting in here, and I'm going to say Katrina has an idea, and that's her idea. And she shares her idea with us as the faculty. I got this great idea. We should do this in the school. And then we say, all right, that sounds good. Let's look at it. So we take our school, and we push Katrina's idea into it, like this. And as you can see, it doesn't quite fit. So we take her idea, and we provide advice to her, how this idea can work. This is what we do to her idea. We make it fit the school. We make it fit exactly everything that we currently do. This is referred to in the research as sustaining innovation. These things that we all cut off, these are things that we can't see becoming part of our school. And I refer to those in most of the writing that I've been doing as next practices. Something like, do you remember I remember when cell phones first came out? It's like, why would I need a cell phone? I'm old enough to remember when microwaves first came out. There's probably 5 of us in the room. But the fact is that why the hell would I need a microwave? Why do I need to boil water in a minute and 30 seconds? There's no big deal. But the fact is that we make whatever is going on fit we push it into the school like this. We take those things out. The way it's supposed to work, it's supposed to work like this. And I'll give you an example, but there's her idea, and we should say, try it. Push it into the school. And we should push it into the school and change the school to accept the idea. This is referred to as disruptive innovation. This is the work of a guy by the name of Clay Christensen at Harvard. He wrote a book called Disrupting Class. It wasn't about discipline. It was about the fact that if we don't do this in our schools, we're going to lose them. So this is disruption when you push it in. We don't like disruption in education. We don't like any of those things. But let me give you an example. And I'm going to use the cell phone again, but I want to give it to you in a certain way. They came out with that bag phone. Remember the bag phone? Right? And the antenna on the car. All right. When they designed that, they knew it wasn't perfect, but they pushed it out into the society as it was. And if they did not do that, you wouldn't have that iPhone or Samsung in your hand right now. Because that's about a 10th generations beyond that bag phone, maybe even more. So the theory is you put something in, you work on it, you adapt it, you slowly make changes to it. Version 1, version 2, version 3. You don't throw it out. They didn't say, oh, bag phones don't work, throw them all away. They said, we can make this better. That's the culture you need in a school to create that innovative culture that I talked about. That's really where we need to go. And here's the problem. This is Charlie Chaplin's mask all over again. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. You see, that's why if you're creating opportunity in your school, bring in kids, bring in people that don't work in schools. Because we're going to say, here's the thing. No offense to anybody, but it's just because you have a short time frame when you do a speech like this, you just have to go to the best ideas, best things at one time. But if a child has a reading problem, what we do is we bring in all these reading specialists. Well, maybe it's not a reading problem. Reading specialists are going to, they'll get more reading. Or kids struggling in math, more math. Maybe they just have a really terrible attitude about school in general, and we got to figure out how to give them early wins. But, we compartmentalize and we use traditional approaches to our answers. So this is what it's really about. We have to, I have a daughter-in-law that's a brand new teacher, and she's pretty excited. And she's a pretty talented student, with respect to technology. She's also an Apple educator. And she's in a school where every time she mentions an idea, the veteran faculty around the table go, we tried that in 1963 and didn't work, and so it can't happen. I remember being a teacher when we were trying to do individualized instruction in the 1970s and early 80s, and we had no technology to manage it. We had index cards, and it didn't work, right? And so people remember that. So when somebody says, we're going to no, we're not. We tried that, Well, we tried to get to the moon through several different things, and eventually we got there. And they didn't say, the Wright brothers, after the first time they built a plane, it didn't go up. They said, oh, that's it. No, bad idea. Let's try something else. Let's make a car. You know, it's not the way it works. You got to stay at it. Now, in our schools, we've got to be able to do two things at once. And I don't like saying this, but it's the truth. What we have to do is this. You see, do what we're already doing even better. This is where we use best practices. You all know best practices, right? Like good wait time and all the strategies that are out there. If you're using best practices every day, you'll never reinvent public education. Because best practices are things that we know work in the old textbook-driven system. We'll never get out of it. It's just like you know, think of the medical profession. Best practices. It used to be best practice, if you had a blocked artery, they would break your chest open, take a vein from your leg, and do cardiac bypass surgery. That was best practice. Then someone figured out that when someone's having a really bad time with their heart, breaking their chest open is a dangerous thing to do. So they worked on how can we get to that clot without breaking the chest open? Well, they figured out a catheter. So then they started to go up with a catheter and they'd suck the clot out. And then they realized that when they did that, it weakened the artery sometimes, so they built stents. Then stents caused blood clotting, so they put the people on Coumadin so that their blood was thin, and they found out that caused problems. And then they built a stent that was coated with Coumadin so they didn't have to take it, so there would be no blood clot. Now, today, when you have a blood clot, their first line of attack is a drug. Now, so they went from what was a best practice to the next best practice to the next best practice to the next best practice. And that's the same theory and concept we have to play with in school. So you have to do two things at once. Do what we're already doing even better, and then try over here in this area right there, try something. Try something different. In hopes that if it gets better, it starts to become even better, and it becomes the next best practice. It becomes the clot-busting drug. It becomes something different. That's kind of the theory that we have to pay attention to. And I do believe, you know, when I think about this, a lot of times teachers say, well, I'm really afraid to do, I like doing what I'm doing. I don't give me anything else to do. Well, look, as I said, teachers will always be here. But I do believe in this came out of Edutopia. But, you know, technology won't replace teachers. But teachers who use technology will probably replace teachers who don't. And that's a fact. In any business right now, technology has become a way in most businesses to drive efficiency in most businesses. And in schools, we think of technology as an added expense. And it's really not. It's a way to create some efficiency. So I want to share with you some of those thoughts around that. So are any of you out there familiar with this chart? Just looking. Might be a handful or so. This is called the Rigor Relevance Framework. It was developed by my former partner, Bill Daggett. And I'm just going to give you the 1-minute version of it. So do you see this vertical here? I don't know if you can read it from where you are, but if you can you identify what that vertical is? Bloom's Taxonomy. You know, you can use the levels of knowledge. You could use the new Bloom's Taxonomy. So down here is knowledge and awareness, and up here is evaluation and synthesis. Now, when we were all trained as teachers, we were trained to use Bloom's Taxonomy in our lesson planning. And then we got a job. And then we said, out with that, you know. If we did, I'm sure, I know I did. I mean, I saw the book one day and, you know, cleaning out books, like, oh yeah, that, you know, I threw that away. But Bloom's Taxonomy is about rigor. Low rigor down here, knowledge and comprehension. High rigor up here when we ask kids to take a position, right? Take a look at the two authors and compare and contrast their writing. That's what a high level is. Low level, you know, double-digit addition with carrying, subtraction, all those basic skills. The bottom is about application or relevance. It's a model that Bill and a bunch of us built. And the bottom basically starts here with knowledge in one discipline, knowledge of math. The second higher level is doing math in math, like recognizing math and then doing math in math. The third is applying math in other disciplines, doing math in language arts. The fourth is doing math in real world, I'm clicking as I go. Doing math in real world predictable situations, using math to determine a mortgage. And the last is doing math in real world unpredictable situations, doing math to determine which cell phone plan is the best for your family, because it goes all over. There's no real predictability there. And when you set this up, you get 4 dimensions of learning. So right here is basic low-level Bloom and low-level application. So this is skill acquisition. Over here, it's low-level Bloom, but high-level application. This is like training somebody to, if they're a carpenter, to make stairs, or this is applying a skill that you learned. Up here, it's assimilation. So it's not a lot of real-world application, but up in this area, it's more, I refer to it as college prep. It's like that issue about comparing and contrasting authors, that sits up there. Over here, oops, sorry, did it again. Up here, back up here is the real world. Up there is things like justifying that you're going to spend money on something based on your budget that you have. It's what we call adaptability, adaptive stage, taking everything you know and making a tough decision. That's what sits up in D. So when I look at this and I think, where do educators spend most of their time? And I'm going to tell you, to save us a lot of time, whoop, not there, or there, woohoo, get back. I must have taken that arrow out. I did take that arrow out. No arrow, only pointer. We spend most of our time right here. Okay? That learning right there is basic skill acquisition. That's the place where technology can be a bigger help to us. These areas where students have to think and create, that's where teachers need to spend more time. They can't spend more time there if they're spending all their time in A. So technology can help us by relieving some of the work in A. And that's where I took the arrow out to share with you real briefly. It's like, what if you asked your students, if you were in a social studies class and you said, which is the more important ally, Canada or Great Britain? See, that's not a true or false fill in the blank. That's a very heady thing. That sits up here and up here. But if you want to know the capitals, that sits over here. All right? So to do things like capitals, you could use a system like Stride. And I know there's 2 schools in this district that use Stride. But you should use more of it because it can help you, because it knows all the basic skills. It has an adaptive engine that can move kids to where they need to be. You don't need to spend as much time on that. It gives teachers a better sense of where their kids are, and you don't spend as much time on it. Because I want you to spend more time on higher levels of rigor and higher levels of application. So I tell people mostly as I do this, is this. We spend a lot of time figuring out how we're going to teach something. And I'm going to challenge you to think about doing something different this year. Maybe taking a week, and instead of thinking about how you would teach it, look at your content and attack it this way. How would I learn this? If I was a 7th grader, how would I learn this? Because our work is not about teaching, it's about learning. So let me give you a reason for why we need to think about this. There's this quote by Peter Drucker, and the quote, Drucker is a business guy. He said this in 1995. He said, in the next 20 years, power will shift to the customer. For the simple reason is the customer now has full access to information worldwide. What did he mean by that? He meant this. I don't know in this audience how many of you bought a car, a refrigerator, stove, TV in the last couple of years, but I'm sure what you did is you walked into the showroom and asked them to show you what they had. No. You walked into the showroom and you said, I want this. You either had a printout or you had it on your tablet or your phone. I'll pay this. See, customers now, the consumer has more power. It's been a shift. Where the businesses used to have power, the consumer has more power. And that shift has also happened in education. I'd like you to listen to this teacher, Jordan Dolier. He's going to talk about self-learning. And the way he talks about this real quickly is he basically says this. He basically talks about becoming a great uncle to his niece, and then he makes the connection to his classroom. And I'd love you to listen to it. He does it better than anybody I know.
I've always wanted to be a fantastic uncle. As the youngest of 3 brothers, with one brother who's 4 and another brother who's 8 years older than me, I always kind of figured I wasn't going to have kids first, or so I hoped. And when my first niece was born, I made sure to take every opportunity I could to do what I thought a fantastic uncle would do. Now, one such opportunity, I was in the back lanai at my parents' house, and I was sitting with one of my brothers, and my niece, Haley, who was 5 years old at this time, that's her, she came up to me, and she tapped me. She said, Uncle Jojo, I'm Uncle Jojo. She said, Uncle Jojo, would you please get me some juice? And I thought to myself, like, of course I can get you some juice. I want to be a fantastic uncle. I'll get you all the juice in the world. I'll make it just rain juice upon you. Of course I'll get you some juice. So I stood up. And as I stood up, I felt a tap on my shoulder. And I looked, and it was my brother. And he said, hey, where are you going? And I thought, well, I'm going to go be a fantastic uncle. I'm about to get my niece some juice. And he said, well, do you think she could do that for herself? And I hadn't thought of that, so I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, really, what does it take to get juice? And I said, well, I'd have to go inside, and I'd have to open the refrigerator, and I'd have to, pick up a packet of juice, and, unscrew the cap, and, give it to Haley. And he's like, okay. Now, do you think she's capable of doing that herself? And I said, I want to believe in my niece. I want to be a fantastic uncle, so of course she could do that by herself. And he looked at me and he said, well, then why would you take that experience away from her? And why would you make her depend on you to get juice? And I had not thought of it like that. And as an educator, I've found that sometimes in my drive to do what I think a fantastic educator would do and do as much as I can, sometimes I've taken away meaningful experiences from my students. Because sometimes what we do for others is a tacit statement of what we believe they can't do for themselves.
I think he makes a great point. The point, I see so many schools that say we want to make our kids lifelong learners. Well, when do we let them become learners rather than students? When do we let go of controlling everything they learn and doing everything for them? Where is the gradual release to make them, when they leave school, to feel like they're learners and they don't need us? Because we don't ever pull away from the learning. And in this environment today, there's a lot of opportunities for them. So I tweeted this out one day. A teacher who teaches a student to learn without them prepares the student for the 21st century. That's really, I think, what education's about. All of you that have young children, you want them to be learners. You don't want them to be students. You want them to be learners. So I've been playing with this model, and I'm just going to talk about it very briefly with you, but it has to do with how we should think about designing in the future. And I'm not telling you to run out tomorrow and start doing this. What I'm telling you is that we need to start to think, when we start to build instruction, to build it so that students have more control over the learning and more opportunity. Maybe you pick a week during the year where you try something very different as an educator, and then you talk about it with other educators. But just think about, let me explain this to you by sharing 2 things. First, that thing up there, self-checkout. How many people in the room have been through a self-checkout? All right, good, you've had the experience. I worked with a guy who was the designer of the self-checkout system for Walmart, Joe Gagnon. And Joe told me they learned 2 things about the self-checkout system. Self-checkout system is the slowest checkout system in the supermarket. That's one. Second thing they learned, it's the most satisfying checkout in the supermarket. And I said, Joe, how can it be the slowest and the most satisfying? And he gave me the data on it. And basically, if you think about it, here's what goes on. So if you're in a store and you're using the regular professional that's checking you out, the professional checker-outer, you know, and they're kind of scanning your Diet Pepsi or whatever the soda is that you have, and it's not beeping, you know, and they're there going like this, and you're waiting, and they're doing this, and nothing's happening, and they take their glasses out and they start punching the number in. You're standing there generally, and you're doing this like hurry up, you know, you're a pro, this should be quick, you know, let's go, move it. But then if you're in the checkout line, if you're in the self-checkout line, you got your Diet Pepsi, Coke, whatever it is, and you're doing this over the thing like 20, 30 times, and you start wiping it off and, you know, wiping the dew off the things, and eventually it goes beep. It goes, yes, beep. Put it on the belt, it goes down, and like 3 hours later, you leave with all your groceries. But the fact is, when they talk to it, they're happy. They're happy. Why? Because they did it. They did it. They didn't need anybody else. How many people have learned something on their own? If you've learned something on your own, here's what we know from the neurosciences. You'll never forget it. You'll never forget it. When do we start to get our students to acquire knowledge in our schools on their own? When does it become real, strong, powerful learning? Hold that thought for a second. Let me just share one other thing. Amazon. How many people have bought something on Amazon? I do this all over the world. You should go to London, like everybody. Yeah, you know, we buy all the time. How many people bought something while I was talking? Okay, that's okay. Yesterday we had somebody. They bought a car. No, they didn't. But you could if you really wanted to. Amazon gives you the shopping experience where you don't need to talk to anybody. You make the decisions all on your own. They give you everything you need to make a decision. They let you price compare, figure out if you want to spend a little more and get it tomorrow. They let you read reviews on whether the sizes go big, go small, whatever. It's a total shopping experience where you are in control. That's what makes Amazon so effective. They allow you can get it gift wrapped, sent. You can get it all kinds of things. They give you the power. If something is wrong on the Amazon website, you're wanting to buy a pair of pants and they come in blue and black, and every time you hit the black button, you can't see it turn black, and you have patience enough to call them and tell them about this, they will fix it that night so they never get that question again. They're building a shopping experience so that it will always correct. Overnight, they will correct any errors that occurred that day. So think about this. Think about those basic skills down in quadrant A. Like double-digit addition with carrying has never changed. I don't think it's changed and long A is the same long A as always. So if we built, go back. If we built our lesson for double-digit addition, like Amazon builds their website. We give students a video, we give them work, we give them opportunities, give them 4 videos to explain it. We give them a long and easy, we give them all kinds of activities to learn double-digit addition first. Before we teach it to everybody, we let them try to learn it themselves. And if they can't learn it themselves, maybe the kid that's sitting next to them can do it. So they help each other learn. The teacher's sitting up here watching all this happen. Then up here, maybe there's a paraprofessional that could give them some support. Or maybe they have an older brother that can help them. But the last person, the teacher should be able to manage the learning so that the one point at the very top, the teacher deals with the toughest ones, the ones that need their help, that can't get it this way. And the teacher can then say, well, a lot of kids are missing it down here. They're missing on this video. I'm going to do what Amazon does. I'm going to fix that video right now. I'll never have to go back and fix it again. Because teachers will say, we don't have time to do this high-level thinking you want us to do. The only way you're going to get time to do high-level thinking is you're going to have to do something to take over the work of skill acquisition. That's really where the world is. That's where we're going in education. Now, having said all that, as I try to bring us to closure, I want to get to this idea of teacher agency. Look, I know you're sitting there going things like, you're looking like this person, maybe like, I don't have enough time to do this. I need more training. I mean, I might lose control of the class if I did that. I don't have enough resources. There's lots of things, lots of excuses. But I encourage you to take on the idea that, we are the ones in control. We don't have a fixed mindset. Take a look at Dweck's work. Who do you want to be? The person that lives life saying, why bother? There's nothing I can do about it. Everything happens to me, and lose control. Or why not take control? Take control. Look at what I can do. I can make things happen. You're the one that can do it. That's what we want. Don't you believe that your talent and passion are what drive you for this work? That's what we really need to start to think about. That's how we become better educators, not by perfecting the past, but by moving ahead. Do you and your peers invest in adult learning? Do you have a faculty meeting where you sit down and say, what are some strategies we should begin to start to take on? Rather than just talking about the buses, right? Do you try new things? Do you show students that you're a learner just like them? Do you experiment? Not like this. This is one of my favorite experiments, right? Like, I have somebody I'd like to put up there. It's kind of like, you probably want to put me there, but anyway. We push our students all the time. They're struggling, and we push them. We say things to them like, go ahead, try it. Work harder. Make it work. Do we do that for ourselves? Do we really do that for ourselves? Or are we like that teacher in Texas that said, look, just let me be alone. I'll get it. Just like Eeyore. Oh, no. Here it comes. So I want you to think about that stuff. And I want to close by giving a little advice. Look, I'm not a teacher basher. I'm a teacher supporter. But I'm also someone who says we have got to wake up and figure out that we need to pick up the pieces and move this ahead. Because if we don't, people are going to do it for us, and I don't want them doing it for us. We really have to move forward, improving our system, right, while simultaneously inventing the future. There are a lot of early strategies that at the International Center we're finding in schools. Some of these have been things you've been adopting in this district, right? Instructional rounds. Let's look. Let's have conversations just like doctors do about patients. Let's work on those things. And I know you're starting to do that, but let's take it to the next level. Let's build a culture of innovation. When we find schools that are doing instructional rounds, they start to say, how can we be better? What are we learning from instructional rounds? What are the things we could take on? And lastly, a lot of schools are beginning to start to look to our kids to help us. How would you have, teach them something and then say, how would you have taught this? How would you as a student have taught this? Now, see, I think we have to start to look at students are the potential. They're not the problem. They are our potential. And they look for us to get them to the 21st century and live a life where they can be leaders. So student voice is really important. Student voice is built on a couple of strategies. Like in school districts, we love to look at quantitative data. We love to look at test scores and go, oh, look at the kids here that don't have this skill, right? That's helpful. But the other kind of data we should look at is qualitative data. Do we ask our kids after they've been here, how's it going? Give us some advice. How do you feel? We do a lot of this work in schools around the country. And qualitative data causes us to ask great questions. So I'm just going to show you two pieces of data and bring it to a close. But I want to show you how qualitative data helps a school. So we do surveys in schools. This is a school in Texas, not Kilgore. It's another school. But we did a survey of the teachers. We asked teachers if they make learning exciting for their students. 86% of teachers said they make learning exciting. I don't know where the other 14% were, but they probably weren't there that day. But when we asked the kids if learning is fun, They said, like, no. Now, this, usually in these studies, like 10 percentage points is statistically significant. This is like a Grand Canyon. So then we sit down. This is really quantitative data. It becomes qualitative when you then sit down with the kids and you say, what do you mean by fun? What do you mean by it's not fun? And they say things like this. Oh, God, if they take out that laminated Civil War unit again, I'm going to go crazy. We don't, or the reptile stuff, come on, it's got to go. And then you talk to the educators, and they go, oh, you should see I come in dressed up as a Civil War hero, and it's like the kids are going, like, I got news for you. They hate it. They don't think it's very cool, all right? So, but this was going on in this school. But I want you to look at this piece of data, because this was really interesting. We asked teachers, am I aware of my students' interests outside of school? They said they were. We asked kids. The kids said they weren't. We then met with the teachers and met with the students, and guess what? The teachers did know the kids' interests. What we found out is they never talked about it. Kids didn't know it. So we said to the teachers in this school, hey, start talking to the kids about stuff other than your subject. So they started doing things like, oh, it's great to see you. I know you work at American Eagle. That's great. And I saw your parents the other day. You have a new car, don't you? And they started doing that. This is in a fairly big high school in Texas. The assistant principals, about a month later, they kept saying, something's going on in this school. And we said, what do you mean? They said, the discipline referrals have dropped incredibly. And it was just because they started having conversations with kids about things other than their subjects. Now, I'm not saying it's a miracle, but what it does is it sets the school up for a better culture for learning. And that's really something we have to pay attention to. So those three characteristics are really important. Rounds, innovation, and student voice. That's a real strong beginning. It builds the base for where we need to go. Oh, sorry. I want to close by just saying, look, we get to the epic win not by somebody giving us more money and we do more of the same. We get to the epic win by teachers becoming the agents of change. In all the schools that we see that do great things, that's what we learn. I want to thank you guys for giving me so much time and attention. I hope you have a great morning, rest of the morning and afternoon, and good luck to you as you start and finish this school year. So thank you very much. There you go.
You want your coffee? It's cold. When you're up here, you can't say anything other than, I can say Beverly and Katrina, and that's about it. So it's kind of weird. You're talking to Black. Right now, when you leave here, you're going to go back to your school and have a level of reflection on what you heard today. And we have the PowerPoint slides, and we can send those out to you. But right now, because I think it's so important while it's still fresh on your mind, take about 3 minutes, turn to somebody beside you, and talk about what you heard, where we need to go, what was powerful to you, and what you think was total BS. So take a few minutes and do that, and then we'll come back together, and then I'll give you further directions. Okay, at this point, if you'll come back together. Brent Hanchy, where are you? Oh, Brent, would you like to make your way up toward the front, you and Katrina, please? Because I don't know the answer to the question I'm fixing to the answer I'm fixing to give, and I need one of y'all to tell me what the answer is. So, you know, when I was listening to this, as I said, this is the third time I've heard him. Fourth time I've heard him. And every time there's something, and he's changed it up a little bit, but every time there's something more powerful. And we brought him in because the board had heard him at a school board conference, and they were very fired up. And I thought, okay, if it fires up people that are outside of education, he will fire up people that are, you know, certainly educators who are doing these very things. But, you know, the whole concept of within a school offering different types of learning, you know, the whole concept of that really opened my mind up yesterday, thinking, how do we have a virtual school within this school? How do we have hybrid or blended learning within this school? How do we have career preparedness for all students and really think about what that looks like? What about that flipped classroom, a different concept of flipped classroom, but what about that flipped classroom where you start with the students seeing who knows it, getting them out of the way, and then really spending your time differentiating and one-on-one with those students who can't get it on their own or who can't learn through other means. And as a teacher, I remember that's the most frustrating part, is when you have a classroom full of students, and if you're teaching, say, 8th grade English, then I've got students that are reading on a 2nd grade level and students that are reading on the 12th grade level, and how do you effectively differentiate for every one of your students? And so that really brought home to me, hey, maybe there's an answer here somewhere. I think also that the scary thing was the brain waves of middle school students when they're in class. But more importantly, I think the most poignant thing to me was watching the video of the guy that wanted to be the great uncle. And why do we rob our students of the ability to learn the material on their own? And if we really want to teach them to be lifelong learners and to own their learning, how are we really doing that? And so I started reflecting on that. Are we really doing that, and how? And I don't know that I have the answer. You may very well have the answer, but I don't know that I have the answer for that. And if we're doing it, if we're making strides toward doing that, and then also the whole concept of disruptive innovation. And do we try to take a new idea and plug it into an old system, in which case we cut out the things that are the most important to adapt? And so knowing that our students and our young teachers have as much to offer as the people who have the experience, because they're seeing things from a different framework. So thinking through some of these different things, I think you've got a lot to talk about when you get back to your school. But I think probably the key for me was thinking about him saying that across our nation, but even around the world, that true change comes from within. It doesn't come from outside. We don't wait for the State Department to say, okay, now you can do something innovative. You know, it's got to come from the people sitting right here in this room. And if we really want to do what our students need, and if you have a child in this district and listening to our parents and our parent advisory meetings, they're telling me these same things. Our students and our student advisory committees are saying the same things. We need to be able to own our learning. And so taking that back, and what does that look like, and how does that look? And if we totally think outside the box of, okay, I don't know how you do it in high school. I can't even conceptualize that. But certainly at elementary and middle, if you quit thinking about in terms of subjects and think about in terms of skills, how could that look? And how would you begin that? And how did we? So as I've been thinking the last 2 days, you know, maybe we need to put together, you know, I'm a good Presbyterian or Methodist or whatever, I Presbyterian most recently, but, you know, we have a committee for committees, you know, and so how do you put together a group that says, here are some ways we could totally change what we're doing, and how do we embrace that and think about that? So go back to your schools and think about who among you has ideas of how to come up with change. And we need to embrace the voices of people who have a different idea. We have to embrace those voices. We have to embrace the voices of students who have a different idea and who question status quo, because by questioning status quo is how we get to next practices. So I encourage you to go back, think deeply about this, reflect deeply about this, and please give me feedback, because my job is to lead innovation that comes from you, not to do top down. So I'm open, I'm listening, give me thoughts, give me ideas, and let's move forward and do the right things for our kids. I think at this point, you do something, but somebody knows what it is that you're supposed to do besides me. Does everybody go back to their schools at this point? So you're going back to your schools, you got a time of reflection in your building from 10 to 11. So at 12:30, you're got to be finished eating, and then you're going to go to an ELA or MLT meeting, or you're back at your school for professional development at your school level. But you do have the next little bit when you get back to your school to do reflection. See, I didn't keep up with all that kind of stuff. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you've had a great morning, and I hope this beats the last speaker I presented to you. Be safe. Have a good day. And go Cats! Woo!